poor girl paid the bus fare for a millionaire with her last coins. What he did next surprised everyone. Before we begin the story, leave a comment and let us know which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. William Stone was driving through the city streets, lost in thought about the responsibilities of the next day. But in a moment of distraction, he turned onto a narrow, deserted street. Before he could get out of there, a group of robbers had already surrounded his vehicle, forcing him to step out with his hands raised. Minutes later, he was standing on the sidewalk. No car, no phone, no wallet. His heart was still pounding as he tried to collect his thoughts, but the reality was clear. He had no way to get home. Taking a deep breath, he started walking toward the main avenue. There were no taxis available, and without a phone, he couldn't call a private driver. His only option was to take the bus. A few blocks away, Julia was waiting at the bus stop. It had been a long and exhausting day. Her shift at the diner had been one of the busiest of the week, and all she wanted now was to get home and rest. The bus arrived, and Julia quickly got on, counting her few remaining coins before handing them to the driver. She walked to the back and sat by the window, closing her eyes for a moment. But something caught her attention. "I already told you, sir. No money, no ride." She opened her eyes and looked toward the front of the bus. The driver was speaking impatiently to a man standing at the door. He looked nervous, his clothes disheveled, as if he had been through something difficult. "I was robbed. They took everything. My car, my wallet, my phone. I just need to get home," he said, trying to stay calm, but frustration was evident in his voice. The driver crossed his arms and shook his head. "Every day, someone comes up with that story. No money, no ride." William closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He had never been in a situation like this before. He was used to solving everything with a simple phone call or a credit card, but now he had no way out. That's when Julia stood up. "I'll pay for his fare." The bus went silent. William looked up, surprised. He hadn't expected anyone to step in, especially not a stranger. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he saw that she wasn't hesitant or expecting anything in return. She just wanted to help. "You don't have to do that," he murmured, uncomfortable. "I already did. You better get on before he changes his mind," she replied simply, handing the money to the driver. With no other choice, William accepted. He got on and found a seat a few rows ahead. As the bus started moving again, he glanced back discreetly. Who was that girl? He was used to a world where almost everything came with hidden motives. But this stranger didn't know who he was. She wasn't trying to impress him or get something in return. She had simply helped because she wanted to. And no matter how hard he tried, William couldn't stop thinking about it. When the bus reached Julia's stop, she got up calmly and walked toward the door. William felt a sudden urge to thank her. "Hey," he called, making her turn around. She looked at him with mild curiosity, not expecting anything. "Thank you. You have no idea how much you helped me today." Julia gave a small smile. Everyone needs a little help sometimes. And then, before he could say anything else, she stepped off the bus and disappeared into the night. William sat there, watching through the window as the bus doors slowly closed. He didn't even know her name. But one thing was certain. He wouldn't forget that girl anytime soon. The bus continued its route through the bright city, but William kept looking out the window, his mind still caught up in what had happened. It was surreal. He, one of the wealthiest men in the city, had just been helped by a stranger who, judging by her simple appearance and diner uniform, probably had much less than he did. His fingers tapped lightly on his knee as his mind tried to process everything. His pride bothered him. He had never needed anyone to do anything for him. And now, here he was, sitting on a bus with nothing but the clothes on his back and a favor he never expected to need. Julia, on the other hand, had already moved on. To her, the gesture had meant nothing special, just a simple act of kindness. She had been through enough struggles to know that sometimes a small gesture could make all the difference. As the bus neared her stop, she pulled the signal cord and stood up. With steady steps, she walked to the door, unaware that William was still watching her. As soon as she stepped off, he looked away, unsettled by how much that brief interaction had affected him. "Next stop, downtown," the driver announced. William let out a long sigh. When the bus reached its destination, he got off and walked through the familiar streets. His building was just a few blocks away, a towering glass structure that sharply contrasted with the simplicity of public transportation. The walk to the entrance felt strange. He felt out of place. No car, no phone, nothing. The doorman raised his eyebrows as he saw him approach. "Mr. Stone? Is everything all right?" William forced a small smile. "Just a bad day, James. Can you let me in?" The man nodded, still looking a bit puzzled, but didn't ask any questions. As soon as William stepped into his luxurious penthouse, he sank onto the couch and closed his eyes for a moment. Everything felt so distant now. His routine, his work, the superficial world he lived in. But what bothered him the most was that he couldn't stop thinking about that girl. The next day, Julia left home for another day of work. The small house she shared with her mother was in a simple but cozy neighborhood. Since her father had passed away, she had done everything she could to help with expenses, balancing her time between school and her job at the diner. She walked through the busy streets to the bus stop, just as she did every day. When she arrived, she leaned against the post and waited patiently, enjoying those few minutes of silence before another long day. Meanwhile, across the city, William woke up with only one thought in mind: finding that girl. It was an impulsive idea, but something inside him pushed him to do it. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe something deeper, but he knew he had to see her again. "James," he called as he passed through the lobby. The doorman, still surprised by how William had arrived the night before, looked at him with respect. "Yes, sir? I need you to find something for me. I want to know where there's a diner near that bus line that passes through downtown." James blinked in surprise. "Any specific one?" William hesitated for a moment. He didn't know her name, but he remembered the uniform. "It must be one where the employees wear blue uniforms." The doorman nodded. "I'll find that information for you, sir." William thanked him and left, feeling like he was making a decision that might not make sense. But for some reason he couldn't ignore it. A few hours later, the small bell of the diner rang as William stepped inside. The place was simple but inviting. The scent of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air. A few tables were occupied by regular customers, and employees moved quickly, serving orders. He walked up to the counter, glancing discreetly around, and then he saw her. Julia was behind the counter, arranging a tray with coffee cups. Her hair was tied in a ponytail, and her eyes held a focused glow as she worked. William found himself smiling without realizing it. He stepped a little closer, waiting for her to notice him. But Julia was so focused that it took her a moment to look up. When she did, she blinked in surprise. "You," she murmured. He tilted his head slightly, amused by her reaction. "Me? What are you doing here?" "I came to settle my debt." Julia frowned, confused. "What debt?" William rested his arms on the counter. "You paid for my bus fare yesterday. I think it's only fair to return the favor." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "It was nothing. You don't have to do that." He raised an eyebrow. "Then at least let me buy you a coffee." Julia hesitated, but eventually shrugged. "If that's how you want to settle your debt, all right." She poured the coffee and set the cup in front of him. William calmly held the handle, watching her as he took the first sip. "Have you been working here long?" 2 years. "And besides work, what do you do?" Julia looked at him a bit suspicious. "Why do you want to know?" William gave a slight smile. "Because I'm curious." She considered for a moment before answering. "I study business administration at night. I want to open my own bakery someday." William raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's amazing." She shrugged. "It's just a dream for now, but I'm going to make it happen." He smiled, admiring her determination. "I believe in you." Julia chuckled softly. "How can you believe that? You just met me yesterday." He took another sip of coffee before answering. "Some people you just recognize right away." She frowned, not quite sure how to interpret that. But before she could respond, a coworker called her name, and she had to step away to assist another customer. William sat there, watching her from a distance. He couldn't quite explain why, but he liked being there. He liked the way she spoke, the way she handled everything so naturally. It was something new for him, something that, for the first time in a long while, felt real. The doorbell chimed again as William walked into the diner for the second time that week. The atmosphere was the same as his last visit, Freshly brewed coffee, warm bread straight from the oven, and the constant hum of customers coming and going. But to him, something felt different this time. Maybe it was Julia. He settled into one of the counter stools, watching her work. Unlike the first time, she seemed more aware of his presence. "You came back to pay off another debt?" Julia asked, pouring him a cup of coffee without him even having to ask. William smiled. "Maybe, but this time I'll pay for it myself." She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "Oh, that's good. I was starting to worry I'd have to help you out again." He chuckled softly. "I don't doubt it, but just so you know, today I came prepared." Julia just shook her head and went back to work. The place was busy, and William took the time to observe her from a distance. There was something captivating about the way she moved behind the counter, quick, focused, always greeting customers with a subtle smile. But when the rush finally slowed and things calmed down, she leaned on the counter and looked at him curiously. "So, what do you do for a living?" He hesitated for a moment. The real answer could completely change the way she saw him. But instead of lying, he chose the simplest version of the truth. "I work in the hotel business." "Oh." Julia nodded, thoughtful. "So that's why you were so observant about the coffee last time." William smiled. "Maybe." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to figure something out. "And why did you choose that field?" He took a deep breath, running his finger along the edge of his cup before answering. "Because it was the easiest path." Julia frowned. "Easy? Running hotels doesn't sound simple. Don't get me wrong." He gave a small smile. "But when you're born into a family that already has an empire, some decisions are made for you before you even get the chance to choose." She watched him closely but didn't press further. It wasn't hard to see there was more to his answer than he was letting on. "And you?" William changed the subject. "Still thinking about that bakery?" Her eyes lit up immediately at the question. "Always. It's my biggest dream." "And what's stopping you?" Julia let out a short laugh. "Money, time, circumstances. Take your pick." "You don't seem like someone who gives up easily." She smiled. "I'm not. But sometimes, the road is longer than we'd like it to be." William nodded. He understood exactly what she meant. Before they could continue the conversation, one of Julia's co-workers rushed over. "Julia, can you take the order at table 3? She gave a quick nod and walked away, leaving William alone at the counter. He sat there watching her interact with customers, chat with her co-workers, moving around with an ease that seemed so natural. For the first time in a long while, he felt at ease, like he had found a place where he could simply exist, without pressure, without pretense. And he liked that feeling. When he finished his coffee, he called over one of the staff members to pay. Before leaving, he left a generous tip and glanced at Julia one last time. She was still busy, but as he walked out the door, he felt her gaze follow him. He smiled to himself as he stepped outside. He would definitely be back. The following days fell into a familiar pattern. Every morning, William stopped by the diner at the same time, always ordering coffee. At first, Julia pretended not to notice, but it didn't take long for her to realize his presence had become part of the routine. He always struck up a conversation, and little by little, their exchanges became more natural. Julia grew accustomed to him, and without even realizing it, she started looking forward to seeing him walk through the door each morning. One day, as he waited for his coffee, William leaned on the counter and said, "Do you have a minute?" She gave him a wary look. "That depends. I want to show you something." Julia hesitated, but curiosity got the better of her. "Okay." William pulled out his phone and opened a photo. He turned the screen toward her, revealing the elegant facade of a beachfront hotel. "This is one of my family's hotels." She blinked in surprise. "You own that?" "Technically, I'm the heir to it. But yes, I help run it." Julia studied the photo for a moment. "Sounds incredible," he smiled. "And it has a cafe inside." "Now that makes it even more interesting," he laughed. "I knew you'd say that." Julia handed the phone back and crossed her arms. "You must be used to places like that, right?" William shrugged. "I grew up surrounded by that world, but lately I've realized that luxury isn't everything." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He was silent for a moment before answering. "Because sometimes the most valuable things are found in the simplest places." Julia didn't know how to respond. There was something about the way he said it that felt different. deeper. Before she could say anything, the diner got busy again, and she had to get back to work. But that morning, for the first time, she felt that there was something about William she didn't fully understand. And for some reason, she wanted to find out. Later, when the diner closed, Julia stepped outside and walked toward the bus stop. It had been a long day, but something inside her felt different. She wasn't sure what it was. When she reached the stop, she leaned against the post and closed her eyes for a moment. Is it already closed? She opened her eyes quickly, surprised to see William standing there, leaning against a car that was clearly not the same one from the other night. "What are you doing here?" He smiled. "Thought I'd give you a ride home tonight." Julia crossed her arms, skeptical. "Trying to pay off another debt?" "Maybe." She bit her lip, studying him for a moment. Then finally she sighed and opened the car door. William smiled as he got into the driver's seat. As he drove, Julia glanced at him. Something told her that William wasn't just another customer. And for the first time, she wondered what his real story was. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. As William drove through the city's bright streets, Julia looked out the window, watching the streetlights reflect on the glass. The ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. On the contrary, there was something intriguing about the moment. "Why do I feel like I should have refused this ride?" she asked, breaking the silence. William smirked, keeping his eyes on the road. "Because I'm not a total stranger?" "Exactly." She crossed her arms, pretending to be serious. "You could be a maniac." He laughed, shaking his head. "Well, if I were, I think I would have shown my intentions by now." "True." Julia let out a small chuckle. "But I still haven't decided if I trust you. And how do you plan to figure that out?" She pretended to think. "I guess I'll need a few weeks of observation." "Weeks? That seems like a long time." "Trusting someone isn't something that happens overnight." William nodded slightly. "Fair enough." The car turned onto a quieter street, and Julia realized they were getting close to her house. That made her wonder about William. He always seemed so at ease, yet he never shared much about himself. "And you?" she asked, glancing at him. "Where do you live?" William hesitated for a brief moment, but kept his smile. "Downtown." "Wow. So, probably one of those fancy buildings I see when I take the bus." "Maybe." She narrowed her eyes. "You like giving vague answers, don't you?" "I just like keeping a little mystery." Julia chuckled softly. "Well, I hope it's not a dark secret." "Nothing dark, just a little boring." She frowned. "Why do you think that?" William took a deep breath, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I think I spent too much time following a set script, doing what was expected of me." She didn't quite know what he meant, but she could tell he was being sincere. "Maybe it's time to change the script." He smiled. "Maybe." The car finally stopped in front of Julia's modest home. She unfastened her seatbelt and turned to him. "Thanks for the ride." "You're welcome." She opened the door but paused before stepping out. "Will I see you tomorrow?" William raised an eyebrow. "At the diner? Where else?" He smiled. "Yes, see you tomorrow." Julia nodded and stepped out of the car, closing the door behind her. As she walked up the porch steps, she felt a small smile form on her lips. The next morning, William showed up at the diner as usual. The doorbell jingled as he walked in, and Julia glanced over her shoulder, already expecting to see him there. "You really are a man of your word." "Always." He took a seat at the counter. "And today, I'm ready to try something different." She crossed her arms, amused. "Venturing into the world of coffee choices? Yes. What do you recommend?" Julia tilted her head, studying him for a moment, before grabbing a mug and preparing something. "You seem like someone who needs something strong, but not bitter." Was that a compliment or an insult? Just an observation. She placed the cup in front of him. "Try it." William took a sip, tasting the smooth yet bold flavor of the coffee. "Good. I know." She smiled, satisfied, and went back to work. Meanwhile, William looked around. He liked this place. He liked Julia's energy, the way she interacted with customers, and even the simple routine. Something so different from the world he was used to. However, as the days passed and he spent more time at the diner, Julia started noticing little things that made her curious. William never mentioned exactly where he worked. He only said he was in the hotel business, but never gave details. He also had refined habits, the way he held his cup, how he analyzed flavors, the way he talked about travel and places that weren't exactly accessible to just anyone. Julia started wondering who he really was. One afternoon, while wiping down the counter, she decided to ask, "You never told me the name of your hotel." William looked at her for a moment before answering, "I don't think it matters." "Oh, so it's a secret?" He gave a small smirk. "Maybe." Julia crossed her arms. "You really like keeping an air of mystery, huh?" "Let's just say I like avoiding certain judgments." She frowned. "What kind of judgments?" William let out a small sigh. "The kind that make people treat you differently once they find out who you are." Julia studied his response. Something about it felt off. But before she could press him further, a customer walked in, catching her attention. William watched as she went back to work, feeling a slight tightness in his chest. He knew that sooner or later, Julia would find out the truth, and he feared that when that happened, everything between them would change. That evening, Julia was on her way home when something caught her eye. As she walked down the sidewalk, she noticed a luxury car parked on a side street. And who was getting out of it? William. He didn't see her. He was distracted, talking to a man in a suit who looked very serious. Julia stopped, watching from a distance. Something about that scene felt off. The William she knew took the bus, spoke in a simple way, and always said his life was boring. But this William? He was dressed impeccably, surrounded by an air of sophistication. Julia felt a knot in her stomach. Was he not who he said he was? Swallowing hard, she decided she had to find out the truth. And for the first time, she wondered if she had made a mistake in trusting him. Julia tried to ignore the uneasiness that had been growing inside her since she saw William on that street, stepping out of a luxury car. There was something about him that didn't completely match the image he tried to present. He spoke simply, seemed like an ordinary guy, but little details were starting to suggest otherwise. In the following days, she tried to act normally, but the doubt never left her mind. Who was William, really? When he showed up at the diner the next morning, as usual, Julia watched him more closely than ever. He was dressed casually, just like always, but there was a quiet confidence about him that didn't quite fit with someone living a simple life. "Good morning," he said, sitting at the counter. "Good morning," Julia replied, keeping her tone neutral as she prepared his coffee. "You seem more serious today." She looked up. "Just thinking about a few things." "Good things?" She shrugged. "Haven't decided yet." William tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "Can I help?" Julia hesitated before asking, "You told me you work in the hotel business, right?" "That's right." "And what's the name of the hotel where you work?" William smiled, but this time it was a different kind of smile, as if he had been expecting that question. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity." He took a deep breath before answering. "Stone Hotels." Julia blinked a few times. She knew that name. It was one of the biggest hotel chains in the country. Luxurious, exclusive, expensive. A world far from her own. "You?" She paused, trying to find the right words. "You work for Stone Hotels?" William nodded. "Yes." She studied him for a moment, letting that sink in. "And what exactly do you do there?" He took a sip of his coffee before answering. "I'm one of the owners." The silence between them lasted longer than Julia would have liked. She felt her stomach drop. So that was it. He wasn't just an employee or someone working behind the scenes. He was one of the owners, William Stone. Now, everything made sense. The way he spoke, the refined way he carried himself, the luxury car she saw the other night. He had kept this from her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" William let out a small sigh. "Because I wanted you to get to know me without my last name influencing anything." She bit her lower lip, feeling oddly unsettled. "That doesn't change who you are." He looked up at her. "It doesn't change me, but for a lot of people, it does." Julia crossed her arms. "So you think I would have treated you differently if I knew?" He shrugged. "I don't know, but I didn't want to take that risk." She was silent for a moment, trying to process everything. "You were right," she said finally. "This does make me see you differently." William watched her carefully. "What do you mean?" Julia let out a soft sigh. "Now I understand why some things never made sense. You came here every day like this was the only place you had coffee, but someone like you could go to the best cafes in the city." William gave a small smile. And who says this isn't one of the best places? She blinked, surprised by his answer. You really like it here? I do. She wasn't sure how to respond. Before they could continue the conversation, one of the diner's employees called Julia over to help with an order. She nodded and stepped away, but her mind was elsewhere. Later that afternoon, when Julia left the diner, she found William leaning against his car, waiting for her. She stopped for a moment, crossing her arms. Are you following me now? He laughed. Let's just say I wanted to make sure you'd accept another ride. Julia pretended to think it over. That depends. Are you still going to keep hiding who you really are? William smiled. I promise to be completely honest from now on. She watched him for a few seconds before finally sighing and getting into the car. As he drove, William glanced at her now and then. Are you mad at me? Julia let out a small laugh. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand why someone like you wants to be treated like an ordinary guy. Keeping his eyes on the road, he answered, because sometimes being an ordinary guy feels more real. She studied him for a moment. So, what is it that you really want? William was silent for a moment. I'm trying to figure that out. Julia didn't know how to respond. The rest of the drive was quiet but not uncomfortable. When they arrived at her house, Julia hesitated before stepping out of the car. Thanks for the ride. Anytime. She nodded and closed the door. But before going inside, she glanced back and saw him still sitting there watching her. That night, lying in bed, Julia realized that something inside her was starting to change. And somehow, William was part of it. The next day, Julia spent most of her time trying not to think about William. After finding out he was one of the owners of Stone Hotels, everything felt more complicated. Not because she cared about his fortune, but because it was unsettling that he had kept that from her for so long. That evening, when she got home, her mother noticed she was distracted. Is everything all right, sweetheart? Julia sighed, sitting at the table. I met someone. Her mother raised an eyebrow. And that's a bad thing? I don't know. He isn't exactly who I thought he was. Her mother smiled, amused. Did he lie to you? Not exactly. He just left out a few things. And now you don't know if you can trust him? Julia nodded. Her mother placed a cup of tea in front of her. Sweetheart, sometimes people hide parts of themselves because they're afraid of being judged. Maybe he was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. Julia bit her lower lip, thinking, maybe, but even so, something inside her still felt unsettled. The next morning, William showed up at the diner at his usual time. Julia had expected to see him, but this time, something about him seemed different. There was a look in his eyes, almost like he was troubled. She poured his coffee and leaned on the counter. Is everything okay? He stirred his spoon in the cup before answering. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About what? About me hiding who I am. Julia folded her arms, waiting. And William took a deep breath. You were right. I shouldn't have kept that from you. She blinked, surprised by his honesty. It's not really about the money, William. It's just, it feels like you wanted to hide an important part of your life, he nodded. Because sometimes my life feels more like a cage than anything else. Julia frowned. What do you mean? He took a sip of coffee before continuing. Since I was a kid, I was trained to take over the company. I never had a choice. Every decision was made for me. Even the people I spent time with were chosen by my family. She studied him carefully. And you never wanted that? I never wanted to be surrounded by people who only care about money. Julia stayed quiet for a moment. Now, everything was starting to make sense. Is that why you ended up here? William gave a small smile. I guess so. She let out a short laugh. And what did you find? He looked at her, holding his cup. Something real. Julia's eyes locked onto his. She hadn't expected that answer, but something inside her warmed at his words. Before she could respond, a customer called for her attention, and she had to step away. But that conversation stayed in her mind for the rest of the day. Later, when her shift ended, Julia walked outside and found William leaning against his car. She crossed her arms, pretending to be serious. This is becoming a habit, you know, he smiled. I thought you'd be used to it by now. And what if I said I want to go home alone today? Then I'd respect that. She looked at him for a moment, then opened the car door. But I think I'll take the ride. He smiled and got in, starting the engine. This time, the ride was more relaxed. The weight of uncertainty between them was gone. "Do you want to take a little detour before heading home?" William asked suddenly. Julia raised an eyebrow. "Where to?" "It's a surprise." She hesitated for a second, but then shrugged. "All right." William drove for a few minutes until they reached a small park, softly lit by old-fashioned street lamps. In the center, there was a gazebo and a lake surrounded by wooden benches. Julia looked around, captivated. "I've never been here before. Not many people know about this place." They got out of the car and walked to one of the benches. Julia sat down and looked at the lake, where the lights reflected on the water. "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes, when I need to think." She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. "And what are you thinking about now?" He turned his face toward her. "That this has been the best thing to happen to me in a long time." Julia's eyes sparkled for a moment before she looked back at the lake. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a different kind of silence. A silence full of meaning. When William dropped Julia off at home that night, something between them felt different. She stepped inside and closed the door, but stayed there for a moment, leaning against the wood, feeling her heart beating too fast. Outside, William sat in his car, looking at her house through the rearview mirror. He knew he was falling in love, but he still wasn't sure if he was ready for it. And for the first time, he realized he might not have control over what he was feeling. In the days that followed, Julia tried to ignore the fact that something inside her was changing. What had started as curiosity about William had turned into something stronger. But she didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to let herself feel something for someone who still seemed like a mystery in so many ways. William kept coming to the diner every morning. He was always there, sitting at the counter, waiting for his coffee. But this time, Julia watched him differently. Now that she knew who he really was, little details started to stand out. The refined gestures, the way he analyzed everything around him, the way he avoided certain questions about his life. She wanted to trust him, but a voice inside her told her there was still something she didn't know. Then, that afternoon, while she was cleaning tables after lunch, she heard a murmur coming from the television mounted on the diner's wall. Businessman William Stone was seen last night leaving an exclusive event at the Stone Hotel's family property. Sources say he is about to take over as the company's president, following in his father's footsteps. The plate in Julia's hand nearly slipped from her fingers. She turned toward the TV, feeling her stomach twist. On the screen, William was impeccably dressed in a tuxedo, surrounded by reporters and business executives. He looked completely different from the man she knew. The man who said he wanted to escape that world. The man who said he didn't want to follow the path his family had set for him. "So it was all a lie," she murmured, feeling a heavy weight settle in her chest. "Julia?" a coworker called out, but her voice sounded distant. Julia didn't answer. She simply grabbed her apron, untied it quickly, and walked out of the diner. She needed answers. The walk to the hotel felt longer than she expected. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the entrance, the security guards looked at her suspiciously. "Can I help you?" one of them asked. "I'm here to see William Stone." The man frowned. "Mr. Stone is busy." Julia felt her heart race with frustration. "Then tell him Julia is here. He'll see me." The guard hesitated but picked up a radio and murmured something. A few seconds later, he got a response and nodded, allowing her to pass. Julia stepped into the hotel lobby, feeling out of place. The floors gleamed, the chandeliers were enormous, and the people around her seemed to belong to a completely different world. And then, there he was. William walked down the stairs, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He looked more serious, colder. The moment he saw her, his eyes widened slightly. "Julia? What are you doing here?" She crossed her arms, trying to contain her anger. "I should be asking you that." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I saw you on TV, William. You were at an event last night, talking about taking over your family's company." He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a long sigh. "Julia, you lied to me." His eyes narrowed. "I never lied." "Oh, really? Then tell me, William, what were you doing here last night while telling me you didn't want this world?" He was silent for a few seconds. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice. He took a deep breath, looking at her. "It's not." Julia felt her chest tighten. "You made me believe you wanted something different, that you wanted something real. And I do. But that's not what it looks like." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Julia, please, listen to me." She pulled her hands away, stepping back. "I trusted you, William. And now I see I was naive." He looked at her as if he could feel he was losing her. "Don't go. I don't belong in this world, William. Do you think I do?" She took a step back, feeling the tears threaten to fall. "I don't know what to believe anymore." And with that, she turned and walked out of the hotel. William stood in the middle of the lobby, feeling an emptiness grow inside him. He didn't know how to fix this, but he knew he couldn't lose her. That night, Julia sat on her porch, hugging her knees. Her mother came outside to check on her and sat down beside her. "Do you want to talk about it?" Julia sighed. "I thought he was different." Her mother gave a small smile. "Maybe he is, but people make mistakes." Julia frowned. "What if he was never honest with me?" Her mother looked at her kindly. "There's only one way to find out." Julia stayed quiet, staring up at the sky. But at that moment, she wasn't sure if she wanted to know the truth. Meanwhile, across the city, William was alone in his hotel office. He stared out at the city through the window, feeling the weight on his shoulders. He had spent his whole life searching for something real. And now that he had found it, he was about to lose it. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. The clock was nearing midnight when Julia finally decided to go inside. The cool breeze brushed against her skin, and the quiet of the neighborhood felt even heavier than usual. Her mother had already gone to bed, but the weight of their conversation still echoed in her mind. She wanted to believe that William hadn't lied, that he had simply gotten lost between the life he had and the life he wanted. But how could she trust someone who seemed to live in two completely different worlds? Julia lay down on her bed, staring at the dark ceiling. No matter how much she tried to ignore it, the ache in her chest was real. She cared about him, much more than she should. But caring wasn't enough. William didn't sleep that night. Sitting in his office, his eyes fixed on the city lights, he felt like everything around him was falling apart. Julia had been the first person to see him beyond his last name, the first to treat him like an ordinary man. And now she saw him the way everyone else did. He had never cared what people thought of him. But caring about what Julia thought, that terrified him. He picked up his phone, typed out a message, but didn't have the courage to send it. What could he even say? He wanted to explain everything, to make her understand that he had never lied about his feelings. But how could he prove that? The truth was, for the first time in his life, William felt completely lost. In the days that followed, Julia and William lived completely separate lives. She buried herself in work, trying to ignore how much she missed him. He, on the other hand, threw himself into his family's business but couldn't focus. Each morning at the diner felt incomplete without William sitting at the counter, waiting for his coffee. Julia tried to pretend it didn't matter, that his absence meant nothing. But it did. She missed him. She missed their conversations, their playful banter, the way he looked at her as if he saw something in her that no one else did. But she couldn't just forgive him. She couldn't let him back into her life without knowing for sure that he truly wanted to be there. William knew he had to do something. Waiting for Julia to forgive him wasn't enough. He had to show her he was willing to change. And there was only one way to do that. That night, William made a decision. He would leave Stone Hotels. It was the only way to prove to Julia and to himself that he wasn't trapped in the life his family had planned for him. The next day, he called a meeting with his father. "I want out of the company." His father stared at him for a long moment before crossing his arms. "This is a joke, right?" "No, I'm serious." The older man let out a low chuckle. "You think you can just walk away?" "I know I can." His father studied him, his expression hardening. "All because of that girl?" William took a deep breath, keeping his composure. "This isn't about her. It's about me. You're about to throw away everything we've worked for. It's not something I worked for. It's something that was forced on me." His father was silent for a moment before letting out a heavy sigh. "Do you even know what you're doing?" William nodded. "For the first time in my life, yes." Across the city, Julia was trying to move on. But everything became harder when she saw the newspaper headlines the next morning. William Stone resigns from Stone Hotels, chooses a new path. Julia read the article at least 3 times, unable to believe it. Had he really left the company? Her heart pounded. This couldn't be a coincidence. Had he done it for her? Her stomach turned, and before she could think twice, she grabbed her phone and typed a message. "Julia, we need to talk." Seconds later, her phone vibrated with a reply. "William, tell me where and when." Julia took a deep breath before responding. "Meet me at the cafe near the park." The cafe was nearly empty when Julia arrived. She sat at a table by the window, trying to steady her breathing. Minutes later, William walked in. He looked different. Lighter, yet somehow more serious. He approached slowly and sat across from her. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then, Julia finally broke the silence. "You really left the company?" William nodded. "Yes. Why?" He held her gaze. "Because it wasn't what I wanted." She swallowed hard. "And what do you want?" William took a deep breath before answering. "I want to build something on my own. Something that truly means something to me." She studied him, searching for any sign of dishonesty. But all she saw was sincerity. "And what about me?" she asked softly. William leaned in slightly. "You've always meant something to me." Julia felt a shiver run through her. "I didn't know if I could trust you, William. And now?" She was silent for a moment before letting out a long sigh. "Now I want to try." A small smile appeared on William's lips. "I promise I won't let you down." Julia nodded. And in that moment, she knew something had truly changed. They were no longer just 2 strangers who had met on a bus. They were starting something new. Something real. The days after their meeting at the cafe were strangely calm. Julia and William kept in touch, but cautiously, as if they were stepping into unfamiliar territory. She wanted to believe he had changed. And, honestly, everything pointed to that. William seemed lighter, more genuine. But there was still something inside her that kept her from fully embracing this new reality. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was just hard to accept that a man like him could truly choose a different path. One afternoon, while Julia was working at the diner, she saw a car pull up across the street. She recognized William before he even stepped out. He walked into the diner and took a seat at the counter, just like he used to. "I thought you had forgotten the way here," Julia teased as she poured him a coffee. William smiled. "Hard to forget when this is the best coffee in town." She chuckled softly, leaning on the counter. "So what have you been up to?" He stirred his spoon in the cup before answering. "I'm working on a new project." Julia raised an eyebrow, curious. "A new project?" "Yes, I want to open a hotel. Something completely different from anything I've done before. Something small, more personal, more welcoming." She frowned. "You've spent your whole life working in luxury hotel chains, and now you want to open something smaller?" William nodded. "I want something that has real meaning, something that truly makes sense to me." Julia studied him for a moment. "And where do you plan to open this hotel?" He took a sip of coffee before answering. "In the coastal town my parents used to take me to when I was a kid." She blinked, surprised. "You never mentioned that place before." He smiled slightly. "Because it never felt important. Until now." Julia felt warmth spread through her chest. He was really changing. "And how do you plan to start?" William looked straight into her eyes. "I was wondering if you'd want to be part of it." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" He leaned in a little. "You want to open your own bakery, right?" She nodded slowly. "I do. Then why not do it inside my hotel?" A wave of shock ran through her. "You're serious?" "Completely." She blinked a few times, trying to process the idea. "I've never thought about that." "Well, think about it now. I want this to be something we build together." Julia felt her stomach twist. She didn't know what to say. That night, Julia could barely sleep. William's offer echoed in her mind. It was everything she had always wanted. A real chance to have her own business. But it was also risky. What if it didn't work? What if this only brought them closer just to tear them apart again? Still, a voice inside her whispered that maybe it was worth the risk. The next day, Julia met William at the same cafe where they had last talked. He was already sitting there waiting for her. When she sat across from him, he looked at her expectantly. "Have you thought about my offer?" She took a deep breath before answering. "Yes." "And?" Julia bit her lip before smiling. "I accept." William's eyes lit up. "Are you sure?" I am. But I want to do this my way. He smiled. It's always been your way, Julia. She let out a soft laugh, feeling strangely light. Then I guess we have a plan. Yes, we do. And in that moment, Julia knew she was about to step into something that would change her life forever. Something she had never truly imagined happening. The days that followed were intense. Julia and William began planning every detail of the new hotel and the bakery that would open inside it. The coastal town they had chosen for the project was small, cozy, and surrounded by breathtaking scenery that carried a sense of new beginnings. Julia had never left the big city. The idea of leaving everything behind and taking a chance on something so new was terrifying, yet exciting at the same time. William seemed different. Lighter, more enthusiastic. For the first time, he was doing something on his own, without his family's influence guiding his every move. This is going to work, he said one evening as they sat on the beach, going over the hotel plans. You sound very confident, Julia smiled, hugging her knees. Because I am, and you should be too. She sighed. It's just, this all feels too good to be true. William turned to her. Why? Because I never thought I'd get an opportunity like this. He took her hand. You deserve this opportunity. You've worked hard for it. Julia looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. I just want it to work out. It will. And even if it's not perfect right away, we'll figure it out together. She nodded slowly, allowing herself to relax just a little more. After all, William had never given her a reason to doubt his word. The next morning, they went to visit the site where the hotel would be built. It was a large plot of land near the ocean, where an old mansion once stood. This place has history, Julia said, taking in the aged structure. Yes, that's why I want to restore it instead of tearing it down and building something new. She smiled. That makes a lot of sense. William looked at her. Have you thought about a name for the bakery? Julia was silent for a moment before smiling. La Dolce Vita. He raised an eyebrow. Sweet life? Exactly. Because that's what I want, William smiled. Then that's it? Your dream has a name now. Her heart raced. For the first time, it felt real. As the days passed, more and more details of the project were coming together. Julia split her time between working at the cafe and attending meetings with William and the architects overseeing the hotel's renovation. It was exhausting, but with each passing day, she felt like she was building something that truly mattered. And more than that, she realized she was falling in love with William. Not just with the idea of being with him, but with the man he was becoming. Someone who was stepping out of his family's shadow to create something real. Someone who was willing to change. One cold night, as they walked along the beach, William took Julia's hand and suddenly stopped. She looked at him, puzzled. What is it? He hesitated for a moment before answering. You know that this, he gestured between them, isn't just about the hotel, right? Julia felt her heart race. What do you mean? William took a deep breath. I mean that this has always been about you. For a moment, she felt like she couldn't breathe. William, I know I'm terrible with words, but you need to know that you changed everything for me. She blinked a few times, trying to process what he was saying. I feel the same way. He smiled slightly. Then promise me something. What? He squeezed her hand. That you won't run away when things get hard. Julia felt a lump in her throat. I promise. And in that moment, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Days turned into weeks, and the construction of the hotel and bakery moved forward quickly. Julia had never felt so deeply involved in something before. Watching her dream take shape was surreal. She spent hours with the architects, helping choose every detail for the space where she would open her cafe. William, on the other hand, focused on the hotel renovations. He made sure everything was going according to plan. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was in control of his own future. But, as with everything in life, not everything would be easy. One morning, as Julia organized papers in the temporary office she was using, William walked in with a serious expression. We have a problem, he said, getting straight to the point. She frowned. What happened? The construction company sent a report saying the renovation will cost twice what we planned. Julia's eyes widened. What do you mean? William handed her the report. The building's structure is older than we thought. They need to reinforce the foundation, and that's going to take more time and more money. Julia scanned the document, feeling her stomach turn. But we already had a set budget. Yes, but unexpected things happen. She took a deep breath. What are we going to do? William leaned against the table. I still have some money saved, but if we cover this extra cost, we'll have to delay the opening. Julia looked at him, uncertain. What if we make some cuts? He shook his head. I don't want to cut anything we planned. This place needs to be exactly how we imagined it. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to think. Then we'll delay it. William looked up at her. Are you sure? Yes. I'd rather wait a few more months and do it the right way than rush and compromise everything. A small smile appeared on his lips. That's one of the things I admire most about you. She raised an eyebrow. What? Your patience. Your determination to do things the right way. Julia smiled softly. I guess I'm finally learning to trust the process. He took her hand. We're in this together. She nodded. And at that moment, she realized that despite the challenges, there were no more doubts. They were building something worth waiting for. The delay in the opening brought challenges. Some people started doubting the project. Rumors spread through town that the hotel might never be completed. But Julia and William stood firm. They visited the site every day, overseeing every step of the renovation and making sure everything stayed on track. And little by little, the hotel began to take shape. So did the bakery. Julia started testing recipes, adjusting the menu to create something unique. This is amazing, William said after taking a bite of a freshly baked cake. She smiled. You say that about everything I make, because everything you make really is amazing, she laughed. You're a good customer, and I'll be the best customer at your cafe. She looked at him warmly. You know, I never imagined my life would take this direction. Me neither. He took her hand across the table, but I'm glad it did. Julia's eyes sparkled. So am I. And for a moment, she felt that every struggle had been worth it. But life always finds a way to test people. One day, while Julia was arranging the final details of the bakery's furniture, William got a phone call that left him tense. What is it? Julia asked when she saw him holding his phone, his eyes filled with concern. He took a deep breath before answering. My father, she frowned. What does he want? William put the phone back in his pocket. He says he needs to talk to me, that it's urgent. Julia felt a knot in her stomach. And are you going? He hesitated. I need to know what he wants. She nodded slowly. All right, but just be careful. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm not going back. She closed her eyes for a moment. I hope not. William kissed her forehead before leaving. But Julia couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation meant trouble. Hours later, William returned, his expression even more serious. What happened? Julia asked. He sighed and sat in the chair next to her. My father wants me to go back to the company. Her stomach sank. What? He said I'm making a mistake investing in this hotel, that it's crazy to open something so small when I could be running something much bigger. Julia took his hand. And what did you say? William closed his eyes for a moment before looking at her. That I'm not going back. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Are you sure? Absolutely, she smiled, relieved. Then that's it? William nodded. I chose this path, Julia. I chose you. She felt tears welling in her eyes. I believe in you. He pulled her into a tight embrace, and in that moment, they knew that nothing would make them give up. Days passed, and finally, the hotel and bakery were almost ready. It wouldn't be long now, just a little longer. Julia looked at the newly renovated building, feeling her heart race. She had done it. They had done it. The sun shone high in the sky, reflecting off the crystal-clear sea of the coastal town. A fresh breeze blew gently, carrying the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread coming from the bakery's kitchen. Julia looked at the finished building before her and felt her chest swell with emotion. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type hot dog in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now, let's get back to the story. After months of hard work, the hotel and the bakery were finally ready. She looked around the main entrance, admiring every detail she had helped design. The large windows let in plenty of natural light, the chairs and tables were arranged in a cozy way, and the sweet aroma of the pastries she had baked that morning filled the air with warmth. Across the street, William was talking to some of the hotel staff. He looked lighter, more complete than ever. The happiness on his face was impossible to miss. When he finished his conversation and walked over to Julia, she smiled. "Looks like we did it," she said, taking in everything around her. "We didn't just do it, we created something incredible," William replied, taking her hand. "I'm nervous." "Why?" She let out a deep sigh. "What if it doesn't work? What if no one shows up?" William squeezed her hand gently, as if to reassure her that everything would be fine. "Trust me, it's going to be a success." Julia smiled, trying to absorb his confidence. She wanted to believe that everything would turn out well. The grand opening started at noon. The bakery doors opened to the public, and little by little, the first customers arrived. Julia stayed busy, preparing orders in the kitchen while the servers brought coffee and pastries to the tables. The feeling of seeing people taste her recipes for the first time was indescribable. "This cake is divine," a customer exclaimed while taking a bite of lemon pie. "I've never had coffee this well made before," another commented. Each compliment warmed Julia's heart a little more. William moved through the hotel, talking to guests and making sure everything was running smoothly. When he passed by the bakery and found Julia, he smiled. "I told you it would be a success," she laughed. "Maybe you were right," he winked. "I'm always right." Julia rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. Hours later, as night fell and the last customers left, Julia and William sat at one of the outdoor tables, watching the ocean under the moonlight. "It was a good start," William said, crossing his arms. "It was amazing." She leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. "I can't believe this really happened." "Believe it? You worked hard for this." Julia smiled, feeling the weight of the past months finally lift. She looked at William, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to slow down. "I never really thanked you," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Thank me for what?" "For believing in me." William placed his hand over hers on the table. "I always believed in you." Julia felt warmth spread through her chest. "I don't think I've ever been this happy." He smiled, watching her for a few seconds before responding. "Me neither." And for the first time, Julia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Julia woke up early and went to the bakery before opening time. She wanted to make sure everything was ready. As she arranged a few things on the counter, she heard the door open. She turned around and saw William standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Just a gift for the owner of the best bakery ever," Julia laughed, taking the bouquet. "You're unbelievable. I'm pretty sure I exist." She took a deep breath, looking at him. "Are you happy?" William stepped closer, gently cupping her face. "I've never been this happy." Julia felt her heart race. "Me neither." And then, without hesitating, William leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was soft, tender, as if sealing everything they had been through. And in that moment, Julia knew. She knew that after all the challenges, doubts, and changes, this was just the beginning of something even bigger. Something that, for the first time, didn't need labels or guarantees. Because with William, she had finally found what she had been searching for. The bakery and the hotel were running better than Julia and William could have imagined. The first few days had been a success, and the coastal town was already seeing their businesses as a new gathering place for both locals and tourists. Julia was busier than ever, but every day of work felt worth it. Preparing pastries, talking to customers, and watching people enjoy her coffee was a kind of fulfillment she had never experienced before. William, on the other hand, was involved in every detail of the hotel. He made sure to check every room, follow up on guest feedback, and ensure that each visitor's experience was flawless. What started as a shared dream had become a reality. But fate always has a way of testing happiness. That afternoon, while Julia was reorganizing the kitchen supplies, her phone rang. The number wasn't saved, but something inside her told her she should answer. "Hello?" A man's voice on the other end made her heart stop for a moment. "Julia, it's been a long time." She felt her fingers tighten around the phone. "What do you want, Eric?" On the other end, the man let out a low chuckle. "I just wanted to see how you're doing. I heard your bakery is doing well." Julia felt her stomach twist. The last person she wanted to hear from at that moment was Eric, her ex-boyfriend. He was part of a past she wanted to forget, a past full of empty promises and disappointments that taught her not to trust so easily. "I don't know how you got my number, but please don't call me again," she said firmly. "Julia, wait, I just wanted to talk." But she had already hung up. Her heart was beating too fast. She didn't need this. Not now. She took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. But even after a few minutes of ignoring it, the discomfort lingered. Later, when William walked into the bakery and found her distracted, he knew something was wrong. "Is everything okay?" Julia hesitated for a moment before answering. "Nothing serious. Just an unwanted call," he frowned. "Did someone bother you?" She forced a smile. "It's nothing you need to worry about." William placed his hand over hers on the table. "If someone upset you, I want to know." She sighed, feeling like she couldn't hide it from him. "It was my ex." William was silent for a moment. "Does he want something?" "I don't know, and I don't want to find out." William nodded, but Julia noticed the tension in his jaw. "You trust me, right?" she asked. He looked into her eyes. "Of course I do." "Then there's nothing to worry about." He forced a small smile. "All right," but Julia knew William wouldn't let this go so easily. The next day, while Julia was busy at the bakery, William decided to do some digging on his own. He didn't like the idea of someone from Julia's past coming back to disturb her. And when he finally found out who Eric was, his blood boiled. Eric wasn't just any ex-boyfriend. He was a man who had belittled Julia's dreams, who hadn't supported her when she needed it most. William wasn't going to let someone like that come back into her life. That night, as he waited for Julia to close the bakery, he decided to say what was on his mind. "I want you to promise me something," he said, crossing his arms. Julia looked at him, surprised. "What?" "That you won't let this man ruin what we've built." She frowned. "William, he means nothing to me." "Then why have you been so upset since he called?" She looked away for a moment. "Because he's part of a past I'd rather forget." William took her hand. "Then forget it. You have a future to build." Julia's eyes softened. "And does that future include you?" He smiled slightly. "If you want it to, yes." She took a deep breath before squeezing his hand. "I do." And at that moment, Julia realized that the past no longer had power over her. The future was what mattered now, and she knew exactly who she wanted to share it with. The sun was setting over the coastal town, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. A light sea breeze gently swayed the bakery's curtains as Julia finished the last details of the day. Business had been busy, but she couldn't complain. Things were going better than she had ever imagined. William walked in, leaning against the counter with a quiet smile. "Are you tired?" he asked. Julia let out a sigh and smiled. "A little, but it's worth it." He noticed the sparkle in her eyes. "I never doubted that." She looked at him warmly. "I never would have made it this far without you." William took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "You would have. But I'm glad we did this together." The silence between them was filled only by the sound of the waves crashing on the shore. Then William took a deep breath, as if carefully choosing his words. "Julia, have you ever thought about the future?" She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." He hesitated for a moment before smiling. "Do you see yourself with me in 10, 20, 50 years? Her heart raced. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. William smiled slightly and let go of her hand for a moment. "That's good, because I do too." Before Julia could process what he was saying, William slipped one hand into his pocket and knelt in front of her. Time seemed to stand still. Her eyes widened as she saw the small velvet box in his hands. Julia's heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. "Julia, from the moment you paid for my bus ticket, my life changed. I never imagined that a woman like you would cross my path and turn everything I knew upside down." Tears filled her eyes. William continued, "You taught me that happiness isn't about money or status. It's about being with someone who makes everything worthwhile. And you make everything worthwhile." His voice wavered slightly with emotion. "I can't imagine my life without you. I want to build every day by your side, share every laugh, every dream, and every moment." He opened the small box, revealing a delicate and elegant diamond ring. "Julia, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face. She didn't need to think. "Yes," she answered, her voice shaking. William smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger before standing up and pulling her into a tight embrace. The entire cafe erupted in applause. The remaining customers watched the scene with emotion, and even some staff members discreetly wiped away tears. Julia laughed through her tears, cupping William's face in both hands. "I love you," he smiled. "I love you more." And then he kissed her. A kiss filled with emotion, promises, and a future that began right there, in that very moment. The wedding took place a few months later on a perfect late afternoon by the sea. The ceremony was simple yet incredibly beautiful. The altar was set up on the sand with white flowers lining the aisle. The sound of the waves and the soft breeze created a magical atmosphere. Julia walked slowly down the white aisle, wearing a light and delicate dress that moved gently with the wind. Her eyes were locked on William, who stood at the altar, looking at her with love and admiration. She had never felt so happy, so sure of anything in her life. When she finally reached him, William took her hands, smiling. The officiant began the ceremony, but for them, it felt like the world around them had disappeared. "Julia," William began when it was time for the vows. "From the moment I met you, I realized my life was incomplete without you. I thought I had everything, but I didn't know what true happiness was." She smiled through her tears. "You showed me that real wealth is in simple moments, in genuine love, and in the desire to build something together. And that's exactly what I want for the rest of my life." Julia squeezed his hands, trying to hold back her tears. "William," she said, her voice full of emotion, "you made me believe that dreams can come true. You didn't just believe in me, you helped me build a future I never thought was possible." She took a deep breath, wiping away a fallen tear. "I promise to stand by your side through every challenge, every victory, and every simple moment life gives us." William smiled, blinking to fight back his own tears. The officiant smiled at them before concluding, "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." William didn't wait another second. He cupped Julia's face and kissed her as the guests erupted into applause. The sound of the waves, the clapping, and the joyful smiles around them made the moment even more special. And in that instant, as their hearts beat in perfect sync, Julia and William knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. What did you think of Julia and William's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And don't forget to check out more heartwarming stories by clicking here on the final screen.